welcome to part 2 of motivation. We're going to talk about sexual motivation here. Cover a few basic things. First of all, when we talk about sexual motivation, we need to talk about the sexual response cycle, which was coined by some psychologists back in the 60s. And the sexual response cycle has 4 phases. The first one is excitement. So during excitement, this is where there's enlargement for the male sexual organ, as it were, and the females has lubrication, and so it's kind of the preparatory phase. Number 2 is the plateau, and the plateau is where the excitement peaks, like the psychological excitement peaks, but breathing, pulse rate, the physical things about you continue to increase. Blood pressure, pulse, your breathing rate. Also during this phase, interesting and pretty important to know is that especially on the guy, you can release a little bit of fluid, and the fluid has enough sperm in it to conceive, to create conception, so you can get pregnant at this point before anything's actually happened. The third would be orgasm, and the fourth is the resolution, and the resolution is where this occurs, the refractory period. And the refractory period is a spot where you can't have another orgasm, so it's like a reloading phase. There's a refractory period also, you'll remember from the neuron firing, right? The all or nothing principle, the neuron fires and it heads down the axon, and there's nothing you can do about it, and there's a refractory period after that. It has to reload before you can do it again. Likewise, usually in the refractory period with males is much longer than it is with females before you can experience another orgasm. Also, interestingly enough, woman's orgasm, when it's happening, the uterus actually repositions itself, and it positions itself in such a way to receive the sperm a little bit better and to bring them up in there. And so it's actually a evolutionary adaptation going on in there to conceive, right? Remember, evolutionary perspective is looking at 2 things: to survive and to reproduce, and so that's definitely helping you reproduce there. All right, now hormones associated with sexual behavior, right? We've probably all heard of estrogen and testosterone. Estrogen is the female hormone. Remember, hormones are part of the endocrine system. Sex hormones have 2 responsibilities. They direct physical development of sexual characteristics, and number 2, they activate sexual behavior, and that happens a lot more with non-human mammals, than it does with humans. Humans, it's a bit more complex, but especially with females, a dog or a cat or an animal in heat, right? You've heard of a cat being in heat or a dog being in heat. What's causing them to be in heat is a release of a lot of estrogen. So for animals, normally with humans, what's interesting is that women will act differently based on the amount of estrogen in their system. So the estrogen kind of dictates their acting. There's been studies that show that women will dress more sexually when they're have a higher levels of estrogen when they're ovulating, and more sexually attractive clothing. Their sexual behavior will increase slightly. Studies show that women have more sex when they're ovulating, and things like that. Whereas guys tend to their testosterone is fluctuating hourly, quite literally, and guys tend to their hormones will react to visual stimuli or to physical stimuli. So they will get rushes of testosterone from some sort of stimuli, rather than the woman whose more behaviors dictated by how much estrogen she has. The man, testosterone changes based on what's going on outside. But it's really really with humans, psychology of sex is complex, just like a lot of other things. We always talk about the biopsychosocial approach to psychology, and sex is like with animals, with non-human animals. It's pretty simple. You get the have a lot of sex hormone release that puts them in heat, and then the animals copulate and reproduce, right? And with humans, there's a couple more moving parts, as it were, right? So some biological influences that have to do with sexual motivation is the sexual maturity, sex hormones, especially testosterone. As men age, testosterone goes down, and also testosterone is important for female sexual motivation as well. Females need to have some testosterone. Females that have higher levels of testosterone are more sexually motivated than females with less. As you age, both males and females, that testosterone level drops, and sexual motivation tends to decline in the aging process. But there's actually like hormones and different things you can take to combat that, as the aging process goes on. Sexual orientation, biological influence. We'll talk about sexual orientation in the later part of motivation here. Some psychological influences, exposure, right? We talked about the guys having exposure to a stimulating environment that will increase testosterone, sexual fantasies, some social cultural influences, right? That always plays a role. Family and society values, religious personal values, cultural expectations. These three can have a high correlation with how what your sexual motivation is. When we talk later about sexual orientation, they don't have a correlation with that, but with your sexual motivation as far as having sex, they definitely play a role. And then the media, especially in the Western societies, the media plays a strong role in showing and helping advance sexual motivation. So the key thing to realize is that sex, is a complex behavior that has many factors, and hopefully you got something. Thank you.